Are you mad that federal law enforcement agents, when they surrounded a South Minneapolis Mexican restaurant, they say it was part of a drugs and money laundering investigation? But are you mad that those federal agents had their faces covered? It is unusual. It is unusual when you're used to local police, sheriffs, deputies, to see a bunch of agents come in, heavily militarized, which I got to be honest, the freak out about that is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But the question about covering the face of an agent, I want to know what you think. 651-461-9226. Because we are a country that thrives on accountability. The government, and by extension, the law enforcement, they're of the people. There's been a lot of pushback over the last 24 hours about law enforcement having their faces covered. And it's not just here in Minneapolis. It's been a complaint about immigration actions, specifically all over the country. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable. And yet I understand why law enforcement is doing it. I'm not quite sure what the solution is here, which is why I want to know what you think about this at 651-461-9226. The background is this. And you saw the images, I assume, yesterday as there was a large law enforcement presence. There has been quite a social media freakout. And in the neighborhood, justifiable concern. I think there is, I don't know, it's always hard when you're on the outside and you see this and you think, look, as a rational human being, we got to let law enforcement go out there and try to bust money launderers and drug runners, right? I mean, come on. Who is defending that? Not me. So we need to allow the FBI and Homeland Security and all of the federal agents without having the city council yelling about fascism and some of the crazy stuff that's coming out of people's mouths in the elected officials. Now, that said, if you live in that neighborhood, I get it. I get it. I don't judge it. I understand why it would be disconcerting when it feels like the troops are rolling into your neighborhood. There was a time in this country when the troops came rolling into our neighborhood. We were grateful for it, right? Like, thank goodness the cops are out there busting people who are doing no good. Right now, there is such distrust. Such distrust. Part of what maybe breeds that distrust is when you see officers and agents with their faces covered. Now, the question that I've been struggling with is whether the reality of the world where you've got, look, if you're a law enforcement agent right now and you're doing your job, man, the reality is like you've got social media warriors out there doxing you, harassing you, going after your family. So that's a risk of this as well. To that end, the acting head of ICE talked about this because the noise you're hearing about this issue here in the Twin Cities is happening all over the country. And on Twitter or X right now, Nikki Ramsey says there's no accountability when you have agents masked. Now anyone can cosplay as ICE or a Fed, and given the times and how they ambush people, it's not okay. 651-461-9226. I want you to hear the explanation that the acting head of ICE gave about this issue. He was asked about it in Boston. This is Todd Lyons, the acting ICE director, because the same issue came up over immigration action in Boston about officers wearing masks.
So a lot of agencies were invited to come out 2 weeks ago in Los Angeles where we ran an operation where ICE officers were doxxed. So let's just say that again. People are out there taking photos of the names, their faces, and posting them online with death to their family. It's the mask question. So I'm sorry if people are offended by them wearing masks, but I'm not going to let my officers and agents go out there and put their lives on the line and their family on the line because people don't like what immigration enforcement is. They are wearing those masks because we ran an operation with the Secret Service. We arrested someone that was going online, taking their photos, posting their families, their kids' Instagram, their kids' Facebooks, and targeting them. So let me ask, is that the issue here, that we're just upset about the masks? Or is anyone upset with the fact that ICE officers' families were labeled terrorist?
So that's the perspective of the acting ICE director. It's a tricky balance for me. I do genuinely struggle with this because I do think that the acting ICE director is right. And if I were a law enforcement agent, I think I would wanna cover my face as well. And for those of you who doubt that the officers had their faces covered, I'd love for you to visit our YouTube account at youtube.com/WCCO radio because I'm showing pictures right now from the Minnesota Star Tribune. These are pictures from Elizabeth Flores, great photographer for the Star Tribune. Elizabeth took these photos, and you see federal agents, almost all of them who are standing and surrounding Las Cuatro Milpas on Lake Street, have everything but their eyes covered. So whether it's like, it's those, I don't know what you call these things. It's like the sort of silk fabric you see skiers wear.
Was it like the neck gaiters that
It's like
we
a
saw
gaiter.
a bunch of those?
That's right, the neck gaiter.
During like the pandemic.
There's one police officer with Homeland Security kind of patch on his arm that's shown with an American flag gaiter. And I don't know, man. Like, I get it. I get the fact that you are concerned that your family could be doxxed and that you become the target of harassment. What I struggle with is is that part of the job? This is a weighing question. What is more important? Is it more important to be able to identify who are these people who are showing up and are claiming to be ICE? And Ugel on YouTube says, my concern is that random people can pretend to be ICE. If I were a kidnapper, it's a perfect costume. Now, the concern of Nikki and the concern of Ugel it's a real concern in this particular scenario. There was no doubt this was a law enforcement action. Whether you agree with, look, anyone who agrees or disagrees, like, you don't really know what you're talking about. Like, we don't know if it was legitimate or illegitimate. We don't know. They say it was not an immigration action. I believe that. I would also say, like, do we need ICE to be hanging around then? Like, no. How about no? If you don't want everyone to question, is this an immigration action or not? Have the ICE guys in plain clothes like 2 blocks away. What are we doing? But there is something that makes me a little uncomfortable about seeing all these officers with their faces covered. Jeff is in Sauk Rapids on the CCO Talk and Text line, 651-461-9226. Jeff, I'm conflicted on this. I understand why the law enforcement agents would feel like they need to protect themselves and their families, but it sure looks like, I don't know, doesn't look like America policing in America to me.
I'm not conflicted one bit. When it comes to civil liberties, protection of the populace, err on the side of caution, take off the masks. About a week and a half ago, Governor Walz got a lot of criticism for referring to ICE as Trump's Gestapo, I believe. Well, he may have overstated a little bit, but you know what? We don't need a bunch of masked stormtroopers rolling around, raising hell, shoving people around. There was a video a couple of days of maybe it was an FBI guy that shoved an old man to the sidewalk. We don't need that. And as far as you ICE guys, if you're afraid to show your mug, get a different job.
Yeah.
Don't be a sissy.
Yeah.
I used to be law enforcement. I know what it's like. I don't care. You put on your uniform, you show your face, you wear a nameplate, you wear your badge, go to work, and well, that's just the way it is.
And that is the way it is, right? Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the reality. That's the expectation we have for local police, right? You have your name displayed. If someone asks for your badge number, you give the badge number. Why should this be any different? Lots of text coming in. We'll share more of your reaction. The question is simple. Should law enforcement be able to cover their faces when they're doing a big action like this? I mean, I'm genuinely conflicted on this. I really am, because I understand the law enforcement perspective of this, and a texter, as we're talking about whether we're okay with having the FBI or Homeland Security agents, U.S. Marshals, are we okay with them covering their face? Texter says, do you think only the good guys have facial recognition? Don't be too surprised if the cartels have this technology and can go after law enforcement and families after raids like this. I mean, there's validity to that. Another texter, they need anonymity to be able to perform their jobs and keep their own personal safety. Another texter says, don't get why they are covering their faces. Are they embarrassed? They don't want to get flack from family members? They're not really ICE agents, or maybe they really are ICE agents. You know, the other part is from a texter, says Jason, and this is a retired law enforcement officer. The reason they have their faces covered is because they work undercover. And they can't allow their faces to be seen because it could jeopardize the current and other investigations. And I would say, then you probably should not be on the front line of doing the raid. You can work undercover, but you don't have to be the one that serves the warrant. I mean, law enforcement has been dealing with this issue, the issue of officers being identified by the bad guys and being threatened for a long time. That's not new, Dan.
No, that's not new.
But this is kind of new, like to have them all.
This kind of federal response.
The federal response.
Yeah, is something we don't see terribly often.
And if you had local cops doing that, I think people would lose their mind.
Well, and that was the fear. That was why the reaction was as strong as it was yesterday, because when you have Hennepin County Sheriff's Office there and you have Minneapolis showing up at one point, it's not clear. Are they participating in this raid, or are they just there to try and keep the peace with the crowd that had assembled? And that's how things easily get out of control. I don't necessarily buy I mean, in that picture you showed, there was half a dozen guys standing there.
Yeah.
All of those I'm supposed to buy. All of those were involved in this undercover project. I don't know. The other thing that isn't getting said here is that there is an intimidation factor when you have military style vehicles showing up and you have federal officers getting out in military gear, holding military style weapons with their faces covered. There is a certain intimidation factor. And we know, better or worse, good or bad, however you want to judge it, but our president loves to be the big tough guy and loves this look. There's no question about that. So they're serving the ethos, do you say, of this administration to a degree in this. That's just part of it. I'm not saying it's all of it,
right?
But that's certainly a part of it too. And we have, as a society, have to ask ourselves, you know, are law enforcement officials here to protect people, or are they here to intimidate people? And that's a real tricky line to find the balance on.
Yeah, and I'm not upset about the big weaponry and the helmets and the bulletproof vests like some people are. I think if you are responding to, you know, you're doing a raid where you have reason to believe, you got a warrant, a judge approved it, you have reason to believe that there's drug smuggling and money laundering going on. There's also reason to believe that the place you're raiding is loaded with weapons. So I have zero issue with the helmets and the bulletproof. And Now, I mean, I don't know why we're camouflaged exactly. I think that's just what their gear is. But, I do think it's valid to say, like, all right, look, the people who are complaining about this, are they going to feel better if, like, the uniforms were plain blue instead of camouflage? I don't think so. But I do think it's valid to ask questions about covering the face. I don't know. Mike's in Woodbury. Mike, thanks for calling.
Jason,
What
yeah.
what do you
Well,
think about it?
Jason, well, I'm going to tell you one thing, Jason. First of all, though, and then being a standpoint, having past experience in public service, well, I never personally wore any SWAT gear during my tenure.
Right.
But, well, usually you have to understand, though, that sometimes the facial coverings, I mean, for purpose, they serve as a purpose to protect the officers from a whole variety of threats. You know what I mean? I mean, if that's some or something has a known documented case or alleged to have pose any kind of extreme imminent threat to not just themselves but to others or the community or general public as well, they have to take various extreme precautions to protect. And sometimes facial coverings are usually an example. And sometimes if the known assailants, when they're going to someone's place to bust them, right, you never know about what these people are capable of doing. Sometimes they could use deadly chemicals of whatever kind, and once that someone can breathe into
Well,
chemicals, depending on.
that's not the kind of mass we're talking about,
Well,
though,
no,
right?
you have to understand. Sometimes you don't know these people. Sometimes, and
No, but these guys are wearing like a gaiter. If there's some sort of chemical agent or something, a gaiter isn't going to help you. This is done to hide your identity, and the head of ICE just said why they're covering their face, because they're worried they're going to be doxxed or their families are going to be criticized, or because we're in such a volatile situation now that people will come after these law enforcement agents. I'm just not sure if that's valid. If we're okay with saying, all right, because there are some lunatics out there who are going to come after the cops, then now you can cover your face and with, I don't know. Maybe it should be part of the official uniform if we're going to decide that it is okay to cover your face. But I don't know. I think it's important for us as civilians to be able to identify who the law enforcement is when they're responding. I just don't. Now, I also understand the side of it where if I were a cop, I would be like, look, we see the reaction. You have city council members saying that there's fascism on display. So the elected officials are not exactly being the grown-ups in this scenario, as far as I'm concerned. So I don't know. I feel very conflicted about it. I really do. Texter says, maybe you should stop stirring the pot. Let the cops do their work. Join the force if you can do it better. Come on now. Like, there are people out there, and I criticize the people who reflexively are mad about anything the police do. And I also will criticize those of you who cannot handle having a conversation about whether we're doing it the way we like or not. We can talk about this stuff. It doesn't mean we do not love and support law enforcement. We do. I am grateful that these federal agents came and are trying to put an end to drug smuggling and money laundering. Thank you. I'm grateful for it. I think it's also fair to say, like, is this how we do it?